What happens when your own voice becomes your prison? When the words in your heart burn to get out, but the world only laughs at your struggle. In a dusty village square, under the scorching sun, a crowd gathers, not to listen, but to jeer. A young boy holds a secret that could save them all, but first, he must conquer the silence that binds him. This isn't just a story about speech impediment. It's a story about the courage to stand tall when everyone expects you to crumble. Before he became a legend, there was simply David. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Is it morning in Lagos, evening in Nairobi, or midnight in London? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Now, lean in. Because the loudest roar often comes from the quietest soul. The village of Green Valley was a place where news traveled faster than the wind, and silence was a luxury no one could afford. In the center of the bustling market, where women sold bright red peppers and men argued over the price of yam, noise was the currency of life. To be heard was to be respected. To be loud was to be strong. But for 12-year-old David, the world was a terrifying wall of sound he could never climb. David was a boy of deep thoughts but broken words. His mind was as sharp as a machete, and his heart was as vast as the river, but his tongue was a heavy stone that refused to move. Every morning, David would wake up with a knot in his stomach, dreading the moment he would have to speak. He lived with his grandmother, Mama Sarah, a woman with hands rough from farming but eyes full of gentle patience. She understood his silence, but the rest of the village did not. The other boys, led by a tall, arrogant teenager named Michael, made David's life a misery. They would circle him near the village well, mocking the way his jaw trembled when he tried to say a simple greeting. They called him the broken record or David the Mute. They laughed until tears ran down their faces, never seeing the storm of shame and anger brewing behind David's quiet eyes. One sweltering afternoon, a stranger arrived in Green Valley. He arrived in a shiny black car that kicked up clouds of dust, looking like a king from a faraway land. His suit was creased, his shoes were polished, and his smile was too wide, too bright. He called himself Mr. Stone. He gathered the elders under the great baobab tree, speaking with a voice like smooth honey. He promised them wealth. He promised to turn their humble farms into a modern city. He spoke of factories, jobs, and money that would flow like water. The elders, tired of years of poor harvest, listened with hungry ears. They saw salvation in his shiny shoes. They did not look closely at the papers he held in his hands. David was sitting high up in the branches of the baobab tree, hidden by the thick leaves. It was his sanctuary, the only place where the mocking voices couldn't reach him. From his perch, he watched the meeting below. He saw Mr. Stone open his briefcase. He saw the way the man's eyes darted around, calculating and cold, when the elders weren't looking. But more importantly, David saw something else. While the elders were distracted by a map Mr. Stone had unrolled, the stranger took a second document from his jacket and swapped it with the one on the table. It was a subtle, quick movement, like a snake striking in the grass. David's heart hammered against his ribs. He squinted, trying to read the text on the new document from his high vantage point. The wind blew the corner of the paper up, and David saw the bold red stamp at the bottom, complete land forfeiture. This wasn't a partnership. It was a theft. Mr. Stone wasn't here to build, he was here to take everything. He was going to trick the elders into signing away their ancestral lands for pennies. The village would be destroyed, the families evicted, and the history of Green Valley erased forever. Panic rose in David's throat, tasting like bitter beer. He scrambled down the tree, scraping his knees against the rough bark. He hit the ground with a thud, dust billowing around him. The elders turned, startled. Mr. Stone's smile faltered for a second before returning, tighter than before. Michael and the other boys, who were playing nearby, stopped and stared. David stood up, his chest heaving. He knew he had to speak. He had to warn Elder John, the head of the village council. He opened his mouth, but the familiar, paralyzing fear gripped his throat. The words were there, screaming in his head, but his lips only twitched. The silence stretched, heavy and agonizing, as the village waited for the boy who could not speak to save them. The silence in the village square was not peaceful, it was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Elder John frowned, adjusting his glasses. David. What is it, child? Why did you fall from the tree? The concern in the old man's voice was genuine, but behind him, Mr. Stone checked his gold watch, tapping his foot impatiently. We are in the middle of important business, boy, the stranger said, his voice dripping with false politeness. Run along and play. David took a step forward, his hands trembling at his sides. He pointed a shaking finger at the papers on the table. HHE. David started, the syllable getting stuck in his throat. He is LLR. The word line refused to come out. It bounced around his mouth, hitting his teeth, trapping him in a cycle of stuttering that sounded like a broken engine. The tension in the crowd shifted from curiosity to pity, and then to annoyance. Michael, standing at the edge of the circle, let out a loud, cruel laugh. Look at him. The broken record is trying to sing. The other boys joined in, their laughter cutting through David like knives. Maybe he wants to sell his voice. Michael jeered. Even some of the adults chuckled, shaking their heads. The shame was a physical blow. David's face burned hot. He looked at his grandmother in the crowd. She offered him a sad, encouraging nod, but she could not speak for him. This was his burden. Enough, Elder John said, raising his hand to silence the mockery, though he looked weary. David, if you cannot speak, do not waste our time. This man is here to save our village from poverty. Go home. The dismissal was final. Mr. Stone smirked, a predator who knew the prey had no defense. He uncapped a golden pen and held it out to Elder John. As I was saying, Mr. Stone purred, sign here, and the first payment will be made today. David felt tears stinging his eyes, but he did not run. He couldn't. If he ran now, they would lose everything. The playground where he hid, the river where his grandmother washed clothes, the graves of their ancestors, all of it would be gone. The fear of mockery was terrible, but the fear of losing his home was worse. A strange heat began to rise in his chest. It wasn't the heat of shame anymore, it was the heat of anger. It was the fire of truth. He watched Elder John's hand move toward the paper. The pen hovered inches above the line that would seal their doom. David closed his eyes. He stopped trying to force the words. He stopped trying to be like everyone else. He remembered the rhythm of the drums during the harvest festival. Boom bap boom. Rhythm. He didn't need to speak, he needed to deliver a message. He grabbed a heavy stick from the ground and slammed it against an empty metal drum used for trash nearby. Clang. The sound was like a gunshot. Everyone jumped. Elder John dropped the pen. David hit the drum again. Clang. He found a rhythm. A steady, matching beat. He opened his eyes, staring directly at Mr. Stone. The stranger looked unsettled now. David started to speak, but this time, he tapped his leg in time with the beat. He didn't try to say the sentence all at once. He broke it down. The paper. Tap. Is. Tap. Wrong. Tap. The rhythm gave his chaotic mind a track to run on. The crowd fell silent, confused by this strange performance. He switched. Tap. The. Tap. Page. Tap. David's voice was straining, his face dripping with sweat, but the words were coming out. They were slow, they were disjointed, but they were intelligible. Mr. Stone stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. This is nonsense. The boy is mad. Sign the paper, elder, or the deal is off. The stranger's desperation was sudden and suspicious. Why would a powerful businessman be afraid of a stuttering boy? David didn't stop. He pointed to the briefcase Mr. Stone had clamped shut. Look. Tap. In. Tap. There. The rhythm was his shield. The beat was his bridge. Michael was no longer laughing, his mouth hung open. The village watched, mesmerized, as the boy they had mocked fought a war against his own body to save them. Elder John looked from the sweating, trembling boy to the sweating, angry stranger. Slowly, the elder pulled his hand back from the document. The air crackled with the energy of a truth about to break free. Mr. Stone lunged for the papers on the table, trying to snatch them back, but two strong farmers stepped in his way, blocking him with their broad shoulders. The charm had vanished from the stranger's face, replaced by the ugly snarl of a cornered animal. You listen to a half-wit over a businessman. Mr. Stone shouted, spit flying from his lips. I am offering you millions. Elder John stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and calm. He did not look at the money. He looked at David. The boy was gasping for breath, the stick hanging loosely in his hand, exhausted by the effort of speaking those few sentences. Elder John picked up the document on the table, the one Mr. Stone had been so eager for him to sign. He adjusted his glasses and read the fine print, the part David had seen from the tree. The elder's eyes widened in horror. Total forfeiture, he whispered. Eviction notice within 30 days. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The women covered their mouths, the men clenched their fists. The promise of wealth was a lie. It was a trap to make them homeless refugees in their own land. Elder John turned his gaze to the briefcase David had pointed to. Open it, the elder commanded the farmers. Mr. Stone tried to protest, but he was outnumbered. The farmers forced the briefcase open. Inside, underneath stacks of fake brochures, was the original contract, the fair one the council had approved weeks ago, which Mr. Stone had swapped out. The deception was laid bare under the bright African sun. The village erupted. Shouts of anger drowned out the birds. Mr. Stone grabbed his briefcase and ran toward his car, the dust swirling around him as he fled, chased by the jeers of the people he had tried to cheat. He drove away, a cloud of black smoke trailing behind him, never to return to Green Valley. When the dust settled, a heavy silence returned to the square. But this time, it wasn't the silence of waiting, it was the silence of awe. The crowd turned to David. He stood by the metal drum, his head bowed, waiting for the laughter, waiting for Michael to make a joke about his rhythm. But no laughter came. Elder John walked over to David. The old man knelt down in the dirt so he could look the boy in the eye. He placed a hand on David's shoulder. You saved us, Elder John said, his voice thick with emotion. We have ears, but we did not hear. You have a struggle to speak, yet you are the only one who told the truth. Michael stepped forward from the crowd. He looked at his feet, scuffing his sandals in the dust. The arrogance was gone. He looked small. He walked up to David, hesitated, and then extended a hand. I'm sorry, David, Michael mumbled, his face red. I mocked your voice because I didn't have your courage. David looked at the hand, then at Michael's face. He didn't need the stick or the drum for this. He smiled, a genuine, bright smile that reached his eyes. He shook Michael's hand. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His action spoke louder than any speech Michael had ever made. That night, the village held a feast, not for the stranger, but for the boy. David sat by the fire, surrounded by his grandmother and the other children. He still stuttered. He still struggled to get his words out. But when he spoke, nobody looked away. Nobody laughed. They waited. They listened. Because they knew that when David spoke, it was worth waiting for. He had done the impossible, not by fixing his speech, but by finding his voice. David never became a smooth talker or a famous orator. But years later, he became the village's wisest council member, and when he tapped his finger on the table to speak, the entire room went silent out of respect. He taught them that the value of a voice is not in how smooth it sounds, but in the truth it carries. This isn't just a story about a stammer. It's a story about the power that lies within our imperfections. Not because he was flawless, but because he chose to be brave even when he was broken. And a heart that chooses courage over comfort, and truth over fear, will always find a way to be heard. If this story moved you, hit like, share it, and tell me in the comments, what is a fear you need to overcome to speak your truth? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins, and purpose finds its home.